To answer Sagittarius's thoughts, the effigy raised its bright forehead and confidently showcased the divine mark of Libra on its forehead for him to see. The divine mark is a special holy symbol bestowed by deities to those they cherish. From that point on, the apostle is granted the power to connect with the divine and utilize the strength of that constellation. This also means that Giselle's effigy possesses strength on par with that which, truly appearing here, unleash its skills. Right behind Kevin, John's displeased voice rang out, instructing him to step back. He grasped the condemnation of the sky, leaping up to prepare to strike the figure. Unexpectedly, he couldn't even touch a hair on it, as the Libra shield instantly rose to obstruct his action. The effigy tilted its head up to look at him, grinning delightedly. With the divine mark, it's like being directly protected by the gods. How can mortals ever break through that? Just after the sentence ended, several strands caused the shield to shatter right before their eyes. It was John's turn to laugh with delight. Are you scared now? What a strange expression that lunatic has. His sword swept powerfully across the effigy, tearing the shield and the magical power split that figure in two. Giselle then emerged from her body. She was disconnected, but still sat on her throne in the holy land of Libra, muttering, "The divine mark, so it shattered." Such unexpected events, but oh well, it's still interesting. Giselle was covering her face, laughing delightedly. The dark-colored foot of a man stamped in front of her, asking immediately, "It seems pulling John into the lion arena isn't a good idea." She wasn't unfamiliar with the newcomer and explained briefly. It's just that Kevin Azar discovered it, otherwise it would have been successful. Glancing down at the blonde boy with a buzz cut, Giselle asked with satisfaction, "What do you think? From now on, he should be called the future saint of the lion, right?" The noise in the lion constellation arena gradually faded, momentarily disappearing, leaving only smoke dissipating in the wind. Looking at the system panel, Jian saw that he had collected the divine mark skill of Libra. Jian put on a mocking, disappointed face. What kind of saint can't even catch a puppet? At his feet, one side was the charred remains of a mannequin, and the other side was Sevier, bound and kneeling on the ground. Aside from praising Yola for discovering the disguised Oliver, none of the saints here could accomplish anything useful. Kevin then asked, "Could it be that you are a god or something that you can destroy another saint's divine mark?" But he was immediately rebutted. Even Hugo Otters was hastily disbelieving. Divine mark is directly granted by the divine. Even saints can't destroy it. Li Jian dug at his ears, pretending not to know and not to care, wanting to quickly move past that issue. There's something more important here. He pointed at Stephen, who was lying on the ground as if dead, and asked, "Does everyone agree that he has won this match?" Someone from the Leo constellation spoke up in protest, blaming the appearance of Libra and the chaotic audience. "We don't know who has won yet." Jian threatened in a typical manner. "Dan, I gave you face, and yet you still don't know what to do." Jian switched to a more direct threat. "Try saying that again and see if I don't deal with you right here." The group of thugs immediately felt scared, whispering to each other. "What should we do now? Being small and weak, we don't dare to speak up. And anyway, the Saint Lord has already fainted. We don't know where Commander Oliver has gone." So they turned to Yoa, the one with the most authority here, to ask her to decide whether to acknowledge John's victory or not. Choosing someone is one thing, but choosing the right person is even better. Javen gently called out, "Yoa, what is your decision?" Uncle clearly knew what she would say, but still asked, which was quite annoying. Of course, Yoa announced to everyone, "Jian has won." Those who had bet on Jian were very happy. Only the loyal ones to Leo felt sad for the Saint Lord, watching from afar as people cheered for Jian. Kevin whispered to Hugo Otters, "Is he mistaken? 20 years ago, he didn't have divine protection, right? Isn't it strange that Li Jian can destroy the divine mark with his own strength without any divine being blessing him? Not to mention, his innate power is already incredibly terrifying." Hugo Otters knew those things but didn't understand what Kevin meant, so he tilted his head and asked very seriously, "Could it be that Jian is the ultimate deity of the new constellation?" Hugo Otters laughed. "Just look at John's blank expression when he was praised. It really looks quite similar." A moment later, the arena echoed with the cheers congratulating Li Jian. He ordered the defeated lions to bring the spoils for his piggy bank to suck in. Several of the young lions who had shouted earlier were now required by Jian to write contracts to transfer to the Ophiuchus constellation without missing anyone. As long as it increases the number of disciples to collect more taxes, anyone who was unwilling was placed on a temporary list. Looking at his triumphant face and Limer, who was looting, Kevin suddenly felt that if his hypothesis turned out to be true, this planet would be crying out. After repeating that hypothesis over and over, Hugo Otters had to ask, "Do you have any evidence?" He shook his head. Hugo asked, "Are you making things up?" Kevin nodded honestly, which drove Hugo Otters crazy, and he grabbed Kevin to show him what was what. Kevin was pinned under Sagittarius's arm trying to analyze. This guy, Lee Jun, really has the potential to be an ultimate deity. Don't you see, he can easily summon the gatekeeper, while normally they don't obey so readily. So why don't you think about it? Why is he so strong, yet no ultimate deity has blessed him? While talking and cursing, Hugo Otters told Kevin to shut up. A man is a man. How can he become a god? The struggle between the two caught Jun's ear, but he did not correct them. He was now thinking about that Libra who knew exactly where he was stabbed, speaking as if Giselle was really present to witness him being stabbed in the Demon Tower. Quickly, Lee Jun could reach a conclusion. This woman was related to the trap from years ago. Looking back, Giselle always had a close connection with the ultimate deity. Could it be that a deity participated in the conspiracy to silence him back then? While thinking, Lee Jun's gaze fell on the notice board for the baptism of the apostles. Those who newly joined the Ophiuchus constellation needed to be given a saint name in order to awaken skills different from those without this privilege. It's time to meet my beloved nephew, the first apostle. Lee Jun glanced at the two young punks behind him and said, "Hurry up and pack your things." I thought there were still many issues to resolve here. Hugo Otters looked up and immediately saw his buddy from the Ophiuchus constellation say, "Since your wife and followers woke up, you had returned to South Korea. That's the reason why Hugo Otters needs to see some just so much. In Canada, where the Scorpion Sanctuary resides, the news announced by Yola about Lee Jun's victory was clearly visible on the magic mirror for Haley to see. Sipping a cup of tea and murmuring, indeed, the Leo constellation is not a worthy opponent for Lee Jun. She leaned forward to get a better look at the person in the mirror. Haley suddenly blurted out as the handsome face of the winner appeared. Haley raised her hand to touch. Now is the time to enjoy victory. At that moment, a small subordinate burst through the door shouting, "Sabas, Holy Lord, the hospital in South Korea is under continuous attack." After shouting, the girl realized her Holy Lord looked very strange. But no matter how she asked, he wouldn't say anything and diverted the conversation to avoid being questioned about the upside-down cup on his head. Haley wanted to hear information about the hospital, mentioning that it was temporarily stable due to the Centaur's presence. The subordinate reported immediately, "The observatory has seen the 13th constellation. It is none other than Lee Jun, Cheon Sung Jae, who happens to be the first follower of this constellation." This was information that Haley paid great attention to, as the 12 zodiac signs had created a special observatory to record any changes in the constellations. Any force that had to share with the 12 zodiac signs would surely not appreciate the 13th zodiac sneaking in. Once the first follower had appeared, other saints would definitely find a way to hinder Jin's expansion of influence. Looking out, she asked, "Is the hospital being attacked the result of another follower trying to eliminate Sung Jae? If so, we need to send someone to protect the kid." The subordinate hurriedly replied, "Eugene is gone." That shocked Haley. That kid hasn't even received the orders and already jumped from Canada to South Korea. Before long, from a distance, Eugene saw a huge explosion around the hospital. The hospital was completely flattened, not simply blown off one floor like before. But the attack didn't come from the other star disciples. It was from the 3 gatekeepers and the fire spirit, who were determined to prevent any suspicious individuals from entering and harming Sung Jae. Seeing this intimidating sight, who would dare to rush in? Just a moment's hesitation, the War King commanded, sweeping his sword to make them clear out. Sung Jae, hiding under the bushes, felt a chill as well. The Goblin King whispered, praising the kid for being quite clever, knowing he couldn't fight against 2 opponents and calling the gatekeepers for help. Recalling that, Sung Jae felt quite pleased. Earlier, the gods had wanted to smash him to bits, but now they were obeying his orders and fighting those opponents. At first, when summoned, the gatekeepers seemed very arrogant, just a kid favored by the Holy Master daring to give them orders. Yet in the end, Sung Jae had 3 big and incredibly reliable bodyguards. His mother was being looked after by the cavalry, and now he just needed to find a way to slip out of here, and that would be perfect. Suddenly, Eugene appeared right behind and asked directly, "Are you Sung Jae?" Sung Jae jumped back startled and exclaimed, "Is it the ghost month for you to show up like that?" He accidentally dropped the Ophiuchus coin that Lee Jun had given him. As he was about to dive to pick it up, a loud argument suddenly erupted from there. Then suddenly, Sung Jae's father fell right in front of him. It seemed that this unexpected landing in front of his son made Hugo feel a bit embarrassed, causing him to hold his head in pain and say, "Lee Jun is busy somewhere else." Sung Jae sees his father, but doesn't see Uncle Jun, so he's making a disgusted face. Many times Hugo wanted to say something but hadn't. Looking at the devastated hospital smoking in front of him, Hugo Otters intended to ask his son what happened when Eugene suddenly walked over. With his father as bodyguard, Sung Jae pointed directly at Eugene and accused, "This is the assassin who's planning to take me out." As soon as Hugo Otters heard that, he immediately cursed, prompting Eugene to defend his innocence. Both Hugo Otters and his son didn't believe him, insisting that Eugene's sudden appearance behind them definitely had malicious intent. Unexpectedly, the sky illuminated with the familiar orange-yellow light, and Apollo appeared with a grim, scowling expression looking at Eugene. Hugo Otters didn't even know why his god showed up out of the blue, while Eugene seemed to know something. He shouted, "Damn, the gods keep interfering." Suddenly, Eugene's eyes lit up as he began to activate the Bible-reading skill of the Sagittarius. A book flipped rapidly in front of him, and Eugene's hand conjured something resembling a pen from the space in front of him. He picked a rather long passage and altered it to his liking. The light fades into the dark night, and man is no longer blessed. As soon as that sentence was written down, Hugo Otters immediately felt a strange sensation rising within him. As he looked up, Apollo had vanished abruptly just as Eugene had altered it. The sun could no longer appear in the dark night. Eugene pointed at himself with a delighted expression, confidently concluding, "I have eliminated a god. The ultimate deity Sagittarius cannot interfere anymore." He wasn't done yet. He wanted to see how far Hugo Otters would dare to challenge him. Eugene opened the Sagittarius Bible again, randomly selected another passage, and continued to intervene. This time, the passage was directly related to Hugo Otters. He collapsed to the ground, letting out a scream of agony that caused the earth to crack. Songjae was panicked, but didn't know what to do. He only knew that Eugene had just read a passage from the Sagittarius Bible. But how could he access the Bible when only the ultimate deity could read it? The content that this brat altered was too bizarre. Hugo Otter's head was pounding, but a crazy thought crossed his mind. Could it be that Eugene can alter the Bible? The Bible records the achievements and events of the ultimate deity of each constellation. From their birth to their exploits, all have been documented, turning into legends and myths. As a result, people worship, build their faith, and the power of the ultimate deity of the constellation they revere grows stronger. Aside from the ultimate deity, there is only one entity capable of viewing and changing the Bible, known as the archivist. Hugo Otters could not have imagined that a young and renowned person like Eugene was an archivist. In Hugo Otter's memory, this entity was supposed to no longer exist in the world. In the past, the ultimate deities eliminated all those who held the powers of the archivist and bound God because their prideful nature did not allow them to overlook mortals who acted blasphemously. Now Hugo Otters understood why Apollo had suddenly appeared earlier. Eugene laughed joyfully as he saw the once arrogant face of the centaur saint now drenched in sweat. He was about to say more when, under the bright moon, Li Jian appeared out of nowhere, crashing down dramatically right at the head with the green hat. Breathing out, Jian criticized his friend. "You were taken down so quickly. Why aren't you handling it quickly and coming back to help me? What are you still doing here?" That year, the entity sent by the Holy Spirit to destroy the archivist and bound God swept through many places, wanting to eliminate all those capable of interfering with the powers of the divine. The entire village was massacred for harboring the clans capable of giving rise to the aforementioned different beings. At that time, Eugene was not yet 10 years old and witnessed the brutal slaughter in his village with his own eyes. He dared only to cover his mouth and stifled his cries. A few days later, the boy was bandaged and treated for his wounds. Unexpectedly waking up in a hospital bed, Eugene sat up. Next to him, someone spoke as if they had been waiting for a long time. Haley simply asked, "How are you feeling, kid?" But Eugene was too frightened, his face full of suspicion. Only when she closed the book, showing a gentle expression, did she say, "This is my city. It's very safe, so don't worry." The sound of moaning from Eugene's childhood dreams echoed in the deserted park near the Scorpion Hospital. He was tightly bound by something elastic and pink, lost in a stupor, continuously calling out Haley's name. A group of centaurs gathered around as soon as Eugene opened his eyes to check on him. Surprisingly, what was binding him was Limer, a creature capable of transforming into anything. No matter how much Eugene shouted, he could not escape the encirclement. Upon hearing his subordinate report, "He's awake, Holy Master," Hugo Otter shouted, "Ji Wu," and then rushed towards his wife. On the other side, Ji Wu shouted back, "Oh, my darling." The two ran to each other and embraced joyfully, as if they had never been apart. The scene was truly beautiful in the eyes of the centaurs, but Gart was actually telling that brat to wake up, without mentioning anything about the lady. Jian noticed Eugene, so he stepped forward and asked with interest, "You have some interesting abilities. Are you an archivist?" Eugene deliberately denied it, but John's glimmering gaze had used the fixating eye of God's skill, leaving no chance to deny, knowing that the archivist could not conceal information. Eugene immediately activated the shadow move skill of the scorpion bow, turning his body into red liquid, stepping on a few columns and darting away from human reach. He flew past the couple who were affectionately embracing, and Eugene intended to reach out and grab Ji-Won as a hostage to escape. But another strong hand was quicker, pushing Hugo Otters away from Ji-Woo. catching her and leaping away from Yujin's reach. Yujin was extremely frustrated, thinking his speed was unmatched, yet he was still outsmarted by Li Jun. He immediately chased after Ji Woo, who was in Li Jun's arms, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't catch her. In the meantime, Ji Woo kept yawning, while Li Jun laughed with delight, driving Yujin crazy. With nothing else to do, he changed direction, ignored Ji Woo, and just wanted to punch Jian to vent his anger. Song Jae didn't understand why his mother was laughing so heartily. Only Jae-won told him. The lady is a huge fan of Li Jun, so she's that excited to be embraced by her idol. Hugo Otters was turned to stone, screaming, "Get away from my wife, you piece of trash! Why don't you run away instead of sticking to my wife?" Making Jian carry her around everywhere. Eugene wanted to escape, but out of anger, he felt he needed to punch Jian to be at ease before leaving. However, that only pleased Ji Woo too much, and she excitedly said, "Honey, wait a little longer. How often do we get a chance to be held by Jian?" Her words made Hugo Otters so mad that he spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground, crying furiously. Even Sung Jae felt sorry for his father, thinking, why be jealous at the wrong time and feel like a failure? Eugene rushed over, but the others were still having time to talk back and forth, making him so furious that he immediately opened the Bible of Jinan's constellation to intervene. To his surprise, a series of notifications appeared saying the Holy Altar has no records, the Bible has no readable entries. As he was astonished to realize this was a new constellation, a white hand of the gatekeeper, God suddenly grabbed the little brat from above, not allowing him to escape. Who would have thought the gatekeeper God would appear at this moment? They broke through the ceiling, reached down, and poked their faces in, ending what seemed like an endless chase. Still holding Ji Woo, Jian coldly asked, "Did you want to open my Bible earlier?" Just after the question was asked, the system popped up a notification letting him know that Eugene Christian was the target to find for the intellectual challenge. The system didn't forget to remind him. This person could pose a threat to the safety of the constellation. Although he wasn't particularly fond of the idea, John still spoke up, "I want you to become the archivist of the Ophiuchus constellation." Of course, Eugene refused. He trembled, blood gushing from his mouth, but stubbornly disagreed, flipping him off and shouting, "Jian, get the hell out of here." He was not the patient type to persuade others. This insolent attitude only irritated him further, so he tilted his head slightly while snapping his fingers. The massive sword of the god Jarl was aimed directly at Eugene's head, but the sword didn't strike because it was tightly wrapped by a red scorpion tail, preventing Jarl from attacking. Something that resembled blood gushed from beneath Eugene's body, but it had the ability to coalesce, hovering in front of him. Eugene realized that it was the divine beast of the scorpion constellation protecting him. He still couldn't believe it was appearing here at this moment. The little scorpion tail dripped red drops onto the ground at lightning speed. They quickly came together, transforming into the lower body of the divine beast. And standing before Eugene was a familiar figure to him, the saint of the scorpion Haley, who had just appeared. As soon as she arrived, she sighed and said, "Thank goodness I made it in time, or the kid would have lost his head. Why did you act on your own without my orders? I have instructed you not to act carelessly." She wanted to greet the kid more, but suddenly, Lee Jellen's voice rang out behind Haley, freezing her in place. He stared at her and said, "If you don't want me to stab you to death right now, answer me quickly." Out of nowhere, Haley stood frozen for a long time, staring at Jian unblinkingly, as if she were looking at a creature that had just been discovered. The silence dragged on. The divine beast roared in anger, snapping Haley back to reality, and she turned around to scream, "Ah!" at the top of her lungs. Her head spun a full 360 degrees, leaving everyone around bewildered, not understanding why this woman was like this. Can a head really spin 360 degrees? That's so strange. Eugene looked up to see the high-ranking deity suddenly kneeling on the ground, trembling in fear, which was truly odd. Above, the three gods and two divine beasts watched the drama with bated breath. Eventually, the divine beast rushed over to check on Haley. She answered shakily, "Nothing's wrong, I just suddenly wanted to walk on all fours." She had no idea Li Jian was here from the beginning. Rumor had it that he was in the Lion City. How could he be in Korea at this time? Haley covered her mouth, trying to keep calm, taking a deep breath, and then turned to look at Jian calmly. But in Haley's eyes, Jian looked like a handsome god filtered through 10 beauty filters, extremely charming. She asked, "What are you doing?" Haley couldn't help it. "Oh my god, can't stand it anymore." Her heart raced like a school bell. She couldn't endure his aura. Haley kept covering her mouth, just wanting to hide her head somewhere. Sung Jae whispered, "Why are so many people acting strange today?" He had been asking silently, and Haley's behavior was quite odd. Jian was trying very hard not to get angry. He reached out and grabbed Haley's shoulder, yelling, "Get a grip!" That action made her face turn even redder. "Oh my god, Li Jian just touched me." She screamed as if he were a cockroach, losing all the calm demeanor of the Scorpio Saint. Even the divine beast had to step in to intervene. "Li Jian, put your hand away. The Saint is currently very emotional. Please don't make her lose control any further." Jian let out a long breath. What emotion? Haley clearly hates me. The Scorpio Saint in his grasp was burning up like she had a fever and then fainted. At a loss, Jian turned to call Sung Jae while still holding Haley with one hand. The boy had just stumbled closer, not yet having the chance to ask, "What do you need me to do?" when John's hand grabbed his mop of red hair and said, "Accept your baptism. I mean the ceremony to introduce the saint and be recognized as an official disciple. Understand?" Hearing this, Sung Jae wanted to jump up. Such an important ceremony, how can it be done hastily in this place? Jian didn't care about the useless rituals. He didn't say much, emitted a blue light, and began the ceremony without giving his nephew a chance to resist. When he opened his eyes again, Sung Jae found himself thrown into a dark space. He squinted into the thick darkness, but saw nothing at all. Sung Jae wondered, why hasn't the ultimate deity appeared yet? At that moment, words appeared above him. "Do you want to become the first follower of the Zodiac of Fuchs?" The text only showed for a few seconds, but Sung Jae immediately accepted, boldly declaring, "Cheon Sung Jae believes in the Zodiac of Fuchs and is ready." Suddenly, a brilliant light shone from behind, illuminating his back and causing Sung Jae to turn around immediately. From the dark space, a crack opened and the shape of the ultimate deity, resembling a human, flew out, dazzling to the eye. He could see the form of the ultimate deity more clearly through its two arms. Suddenly, Sung Jae found this image very familiar. The wide mouth of the serpent emitted a fierce light shaped like two arrows, one in front and one behind, aimed straight at him as he stood there in confusion. Sung Jae suddenly screamed in pain as the two arrows pierced his body, granting him strength and skills abruptly. After everything settled down, Sung Jae breathed heavily for a while before regaining his composure. Removing his hand from his nephew's head, Jian smiled and asked, "How do you feel?" Once the pain faded, Sung Jae shifted to excitement. "Baptism is done, and I have skills now. I feel like I'm bursting with energy. It's incredible." He shouted, "Amazing. Good job." The boy hugged his head, unable to believe that his uncle was the ultimate deity of the Ophiuchus constellation. The kid was certainly smarter than those two idiots. They had been arguing all day without understanding the truth. Sung Jae exclaimed, "Oh my, this is fantastic. I have to show it off to my sister." Haley staggered over from the other side to congratulate them, and at that moment, Jian received the follower skill. The increased follower level granted him the effects of the 13th sense, and he instantly ignited to test his power. Jian shot his hand towards Haley, intending to grab the girl by the neck. At that moment, the gatekeeper noticed the scorpion tail rushing in to stop him. The muscular hand of the mad warrior acted before Jarl, successfully using his axe to block the tail's path. Jian's hand stopped right at Haley's neck but did not seize it. He asked with interest, "Why did you dodge?" Haley simply replied, "Because I know he won't harm me." Then she asked, "What did you want to ask earlier?" Jian's 13th sense worked very well, so the first question he asked was, "Explain to me, why do you have traces of the mysterious civilization on you?" More precisely, it's in the eye that Haley has covered and the part of the neck that Jian was about to grab. Sung Jae heard it very clearly and distinctly. Viewing Haley as actually a disaster, Uncle Jian, with a smile as if he was the only one who knew the truth, Jian did not expect that even the ultimate deity seemed to be easily deceived by her. The divine beast behind roared angrily, cursing Jian for daring to lay hands on the princess. It would risk its life to kill him, but Jian had noticed long ago. These subordinates are actually just disasters disguised as divine beasts, because there isn't any divine beast in this world that obediently listens to a saint like that, let alone calling her a princess. Sounds cute. It could never have imagined that the one it was trying so hard to protect openly admitted to coming from a mysterious civilization. Haley looked up at him and said that despite her background, she considered herself a human. Her gaze remained steady as she said, "I'm on the same side as you." "That's a nice line." Jian smiled and told her she needed to prove her words to be trustworthy. As for how to prove it, he already had it prepared. Glancing at Limer, he produced a piece of paper with two simple questions for Haley to answer. "What do you think of Li Jian? And how do you want to relate to Li Jian in the future?" Taking the pen, answering without a moment's hesitation, Haley handed it back to him. At that moment, for some reason, he broke into a sly smile like a businessman who had just tricked an unsuspecting customer. The note above briefly stated, Haley thinks Jian is a teammate and wants to have a strategic partnership with him. She believes she has already expressed her sincerity by speaking for herself. Writing on it is just a formality. Jian nodded in agreement, then pulled out a wooden nib pen with Haley, but it left her in shock. He was making her use this to write down her true feelings, to check if the lyrics were real or not. But from the very first sentence it was, "What do you think of Jeon? Is it worth dying for?" The answer is, "I love you to death. You are extremely classy, so I have betrayed the mysterious civilization just to come here and feast." How could Haley write that down? Seeing Haley's strange attitude, he looked back at the questionnaire to see if there was something wrong. No, writing the second sentence first would be fine. Wanting to have any relationship with Lee Jeon, Haley had made her decision. Even if she had to die here today, she had to snatch that pen back before everything fell apart. Looking at the answer, Haley wrote down, "Jeon can only sigh." This pen must be broken to write such ridiculous words. But the others who could read it didn't think so, especially Sung Jae, who was screaming loudly as if he were having a fit and rushed out to find his sister. "This is an emergency, sis. Uncle Jeon's reputation is at stake." Jeon looked back at the paper, not understanding anything, and Haley also didn't dare to stand up to face him. The spirit beast had to explain, "See? Don't understand? The Divine One is the princess we chose for humanity, so turning their back on their civilization is to do that with you, Lee Jeon." Haley yelled, "Shut up!" Her face turned as red as a ripe tomato. She was afraid that if he said another word, she would faint again. Just as she intended to slip away, Jian stopped her to ask one more question. He pointed at the dagger hovering above him. Jian wanted to extract information about the weapon of the mysterious civilization and said, "This is what stabbed me in the Demon Tower." Covering her face in embarrassment, Haley explained that as a weapon contained the power of the monarch. By the way, the monarchs are the highest beings of the mysterious civilization. The weapons from there hold the power of the monarch, so terrifying that they can threaten the divine ones. Leaning on the spirit beast, Haley struggled to stand and said, "Even he cannot resist that weapon because it is a dangerous item, so I have retracted and sealed it, as you see." Linking Kevin's words about the repository of human civilization, Jian concluded, "So that's the reason Whitehair found those weapons at Scorpion's place." Garg shouted, "Hold on a second. There's another leader in the mysterious civilization. I thought Red Eye was defeated 20 years ago." Haley replied, "Unfortunately, Red Eye isn't the highest boss. There are at least 3 others like it." The truth from Haley's mouth surprised everyone, causing them to sweat in fear. Even Hugo Otters, who was pretending to be dead in his wife's arms, was shocked. Little did they know that the being humanity had invested all its efforts and abilities into was not the strongest. Moreover, there were 3 more like it. Just hearing that was enough to feel disheartened, as if there was no chance at all. Jian silently absorbed the information he had just received. Of course, he was not happy, but piecing it together made it seem quite reasonable. Inside the Demon Tower, the manager there said something to him. "I'm surprised. I didn't expect you to capture one of humanity's famous pets. That's quite a nice toy to play with." Hugo Otters panicked, pulling him out of his thoughts. "Did you hear what the lady said? There are 3 monsters like Red Eye." With a confident smile toward Lime, Jian assured, "Don't be so frightened. I just have to cut down everything in front of me. That's all." That was Jian trying to ease his friend's worries, but inside he was thinking, "I have to become stronger." To do that, Jian approached Haley, pointing in that direction, wanting this person to prove she was on his side. No one else but the boy Eugene was standing there, bewildered, unable to believe he was being used as a bargaining chip. He tried to salvage the situation. "Stop kidding around, it's not funny." He was about to curse John when Haley immediately agreed. It was John's turn to smile. He enjoyed quick and efficient agreements. Ms. Haley was infatuated with the charming smile, hardly remembering the unfortunate boy Eugene, making him feel like he was falling into the depths of disappointment, sorrow, and disillusionment as he watched the saint sell himself shamelessly right in front of the victim without any sense of guilt. The next day, the sun was bright and clear. It was rare for Lee Jun to have a peaceful day, enjoying a morning coffee with Limer on his shoulder. As he sipped, he said to Limer, "We must take advantage of this moment of peace. It makes us realize how much we need it." Little did he know that this moment would come to an end so quickly. Eugene's horrific scream pierced through the morning like a loudspeaker, waking everyone up for an early workout at 5 a.m. Basically, Jen didn't pay much attention and mocked, "A bit of a shame since you didn't get to enjoy that moment of relaxation." Eugene was crawling on the ground, working with his hands and cursing nonstop. "What the hell do you have to do this laborious work here for? What other reason is there besides the fact that Scorpio sold Eugene for free to Jian? He has to exhaust himself like a true capitalist to make it worthwhile." The more he wrote, the angrier Eugene became, nearly in tears, muttering, "Don't tell me this guy thinks I'm going to die working here." He wanted to pull some trick to meddle with the Bible, to see if there was anything that could change. He was synced with the Bible, but somehow it didn't work out. Thursday again was when the archivist, who refused to be a believer, became a slave of the Ophiuchus constellation. It was hard to understand how this could even be written as a separate chapter of achievement. Eugene waved his hand wearing a bright smile. It must be changed from slave to master. Feeling like he had truly chased him away, Yujin burst out laughing. Kneel before me, Li Jun. Then Yujin took a punch from Jun that nearly crushed his head. Who else would dare hit Yujin besides Jun? He babbled nonsensically, causing Yujin to nurse a bump on his head. He couldn't understand why things had changed, but it didn't become reality. He grabbed the grumpy kid by the head and threw him into a corner. Life isn't always what you want, kid. At this moment, he realized that the two words, I change, had reverted back to slave very clearly and distinctly. The girl on the other side was the one who fixed it, but could she also be an archivist? Jiwoo smiled awkwardly. Wait, did I do something wrong? Libra Chi-Tin is the zodiac sign with the largest congregation in the world, with over 2 billion followers. Therefore, this zodiac sign is not an easy opponent. Not to mention that Giselle is not just a representative of her ultimate deity, but she holds power to the extent that she is considered a manifestation of the divine. Still facing her is no different from declaring war against a deity. To confront a divine being or monarch of that mysterious civilization, Li Jun needs an archivist to document his achievements and increase his power. Currently, Hyujin is the archivist capable of modifying the Ophiuchus Zodiac Bible. He couldn't believe his eyes. He never expected that an archivist, who was already rare, would appear here. Even Haley had to exclaim, Jan is truly a lucky guy favored by the heavens. Now he has 2 archivists, even though Yujin is not exactly volunteering. Thanks to this, the intelligence test was completed and all necessary tasks were done. Jian is rewarded with all of his skills, including the unlocked war god instinct. The headquarters of the Liber congregation is majestically built, standing tall under the blue sky. Soon, news has reached Giselle, who is soaking in a bathtub. Currently around Jian are Sagittarius, Liber, and Scorpio, along with an archivist, so the subordinates need to seek your opinion. Giselle replied, I didn't expect Scorpio to finally come to help, just because of the love she has kept in her heart for 20 years. She covered her mouth with a smirk, that nauseating pure love. In Giselle's eyes, Haley was nothing more than a foolish girl. She didn't care how many people were around him, because they were all just foolish saints. But the archivist was different. Raising her glass of wine to her lips and swirling it in her hand with calculation, Giselle needed to ensure they were eliminated. Crushing the wine glass in her grip, the Libra's eyes revealed a sneaky glint as she watched the red liquid drip onto her hand. Even without Jim being involved, she couldn't allow those with divine powers to survive. The subordinates beside her bowed their heads, whispering that they couldn't understand what those hopelessly clinging to Li Jian wanted. But Giselle knew that those facing him fell into 2 categories. Either they obeyed orders and acted, or they loathed him to the core. Standing up and rubbing her neck, Giselle wanted to know if there were any subordinates from the Libra side currently with Jun. Little did she expect to hear that Taowan's youngest son was watching Jun. She angrily shouted, absolutely useless. Thinking of that girl named Callie, she wished she were here. Things would surely go her way much more easily. But there was no time to choose, Giselle said. Hurry and inform Shiwu to target the archivist. Kidnapping is fine. Eliminating is fine too. On the same day, at the construction site near Scorpio's residence, 3 zodiac signs were discussing Jiwoo's joining Li Jun's team. Upon hearing his friend suggest putting his beloved wife in the Ophiuchus sanctuary like Haley did with the archivist, Hudal Otters went crazy because there were so many choices, yet they had to rush into the one favored by his idol's wife. Jian snapped his fingers, recalling what Hudal Otters had once told him. Jiwoo was not suited for training in any sanctuary, so his was the only option to try. Haley added, it would be better to protect both archivists. After all, he would be the one facing Libra soon. Jim produced a multi-level marketing outfit, handing over a lengthy contract, promising his friend, I will treat her as well as possible because she is your wife. Additionally, it was not included in the official follower list and that was regularly sent to the Sagittarius Sanctuary. It's such a good contract. What more is there to deny? Sign it, buddy. After that, Haley shifted to the subject of Hugh Otter's eldest daughter visiting his sanctuary the other day to check the condition of her arm. Although he had used his mana diligently to heal her, Haley still had to report that the situation was very serious. Despite trying to hold back in every way, they were reaching the limit. Seeing the panic-stricken expression on Hugh Otter's face, John realized that the two were discussing something serious that he didn't know about. He turned abruptly, wanting to understand more about his niece, Yoha. While the 3 were in discussion, inside the construction site, Jiwoo had just finished writing a thick stack of papers and excitedly said he had copied all of this. Does Yujin need help to organize it right away? The kid, disheveled, sat between 2 towering stacks of paper, looking like he wanted to just do whatever, not caring. Earlier, John had thrown a pen at his forehead, leaving a huge mark, just because he refused to work for him, which made Eugene extremely angry. Jen not only forced him to write a slave contract, but also played a torturing game. Glancing down at his arm that kept moving on its own, he cursed this damn thing out of frustration. The eternal pen that writes the truth, having the seal of Li Jian and infused with blood from Archivist's Eugene, chose him as its master. The two had fused together, turning into something with sentience. Now it was laughing and quickly scribbling several pages of blank paper with Eugene's hand. Eugene was very frustrated, throwing it away to ease his exhaustion. But to his surprise, it hit the wall and then flew back to bash his head in anger because its master dared to discard it. Ji-woo thought Eugene was considering suicide and shouted out, not noticing that someone was secretly hiding behind the door. The blonde boy clenched his teeth. He knew he was here under his mother's orders, but what was she expecting from him while his older brother was still being beaten up? After thinking it over, Shiwoo still had to get down to work. After the failure of Blood Fob, this was his only chance to prove to his mother that he wasn't useless. Glancing inside, Shiwoo identified that the kid was from the Scorpio faction, looking hard to attack so he would leave him for later. The woman looked easier to deal with, even possibly useful for threatening Sung Jae. Too focused, he didn't realize the loud footsteps outside or the sound of the door being kicked in. Now, he just hoped to finish quickly and go home. To his surprise, Kevin burst in and kicked the door away, shouting, "Li Jian!" He stomped his foot down on the door and yelled, "How dare you leave me behind in Leo? I won't let you off the hook." Eugene saw the familiar figure in panic, standing up with Jia-woo and wondering, why is the Virgo Saint here? At that moment, even Azar noticed that Li Jian was not here. After a moment of chaos, he saw Sagittarius and Scorpio appearing behind him. Just as he was about to keep yelling, he realized Haley was also present, and all four exchanged looks that were far from pleasant. At this point, Sagittarius noticed an additional eighth person in the room. The blonde head peeking out from under the broken door was none other than Yoon Shi-woo. Some people blame Kevin for bringing this kid here, but he doesn't even know anything. Jian just realized that this was the kid who bullied Sung Jia, the one he had once beaten up badly. His friend next to him, with his teeth bared, prepared to attack the child of Libra. "What are you doing here?" At this moment, Jian recognized that this was one of the two culprits of the blood mist incident he had heard Gart talk about. The kid groaned under the rubble, struggling to get up, only to be brutally stomped on the face by Li Jian's foot. He was very angry, wanting to unleash his fury on the trash that had caused his friend and Nephews pain for the past 10 years. Meeting someone who had beaten him up before would definitely not be pleasant, not to mention Li Jian was now even stronger and clearly hostile towards Shiwoo. Behind him, Hugo Otters lost his composure and shouted, "What the hell are you doing here, Shiwoo?" Thinking about the possibility of him coming to ruin his family again, Hugo Otter's eyes blazed with fury. Immediately, he transformed into a demigod, ready to deliver a beating. Haley stood beside him, showing her anger. Clearly, this kid's mother knew about Li Jian and the Archivist, both exuding a powerful aura. She wanted to know if Giselle had indeed ordered the elimination of the Archivist. Another person drew his ice sword due to a deep-seated hatred for Libra, as Kevin had later heard news that their offspring ordered the Blood Fob to demolish the Virgo stronghold, which made Kevin Azar extremely angry. Yashi won, right? Let me see how much you've grown. Very satisfied that everyone around wants to beat this little brat to a pulp. Jian pressed his feet down harder, smiling with a wicked grin. "You're about to die, kid." Stomping a few more times in line with his words, Jian wanted to see what everyone planned to do with the kid. Or should we just kick until his head explodes? Shiwoo was terrified under Jian's foot. In this situation, he couldn't even keep his life, let alone accomplish the mission. He yelled out to summon the spirit beast, telling it, "Quick, take me to the secret base." Jian kicked his foot away just as a golden light shone with countless chains, the symbol of Libra surrounding Shiwoo, smiling happily. Finally, I can escape successfully. But oddly, in the depths of Shiwoo's eyes reflected the image of Jian, also grinning widely. In an instant, Shiwoo vanished before everyone's eyes, leading them to believe he had successfully escaped. Hugo Otters angrily asked, "Why did you let that scratcher escape?" But in reality, Jian was doing it on purpose. If we just caught him and beat him up a bit, wouldn't that be a bit boring? On the other side of the globe in Hawaii, Honolulu, where the luxurious resort of the Libra constellation is located, Taiwan soaked in the water with 5 spirit beasts of Libra to heal the bruises inflicted by Sung Jae. He was currently cursing at the red-haired boy, wishing he could tear off his arms and legs, making him wish for death. The teleportation gates suddenly opened and a scream rang out right above him. Taiwan was lost in thought, thinking it was the scream of Sung Jae, which he imagined would cause him pain later on. Little did he know it was his younger brother tumbling headfirst into the lake, landing on Taiwan. As soon as he found out, Jian discovered that Thin Bin wanted to eliminate the Archivist. Taiwan relentlessly cursed his younger brother without mercy. Shiwoo didn't dare to resist, only holding his head in fear that his brother might hit him with a rock. Now, no matter how much Ta-Won cursed, he had to endure it because getting here was thanks to him saving himself. The most important thing now was to stop Li Jun when he arrived. Ta-Won led his brother into a room filled with a cabinet containing neatly arranged stones on the shelves. He explained tersely that each stone could be exchanged for something invincible. Ta-Won randomly picked a purple stone, looking the most dangerous, briefly saying that these were created from the remnants of disasters processed in the Demon Tower. Knowing Shi-Wu was worried that the two brothers couldn't handle them when summoned, Ta-Wu held out a string of thin beads to reassure him. The important thing now was to deal with Jian first. So he could not hesitate to immediately use the equivalent exchange skill. A beam of light from the sky pierced through the roof of the villa, particularly causing Ta-Won to scream with delight. This is definitely going to be a super strong disaster that will put Li Jian in a world of trouble. Unexpectedly, the golden beam shifted to a jade green, then gradually consumed the original color. More precisely, it pushed the golden beam back into the sky and completely replaced it. The shape in front of them left both of them panicked, not understanding what they had just summoned. This feeling of power is so familiar. Shi-Wu instinctively crouched down to dodge without having time to warn Ta-Won. He got hit right on the head that was sticking out from John's light, which immediately floored his nose. The boy Shi-Wu, who had just dodged, laughed heartily. Those familiar tricks won't catch me again. But when he saw John had caught up, tightly holding a bird with golden feathers, he immediately screamed in terror. I picked it up on my way here because you left the divine beast behind and ran. The bird, thinking the one holding it was a calamity, cried out, successful summoning, leaving Shi-Wu wide-eyed in shock. Jin didn't bother to argue and simply threw it back behind him, causing Shi-Wu to stand frozen in fear, while backing away and cursing the divine beast. Damn it, and you led John right to me. Knowing that he would give him a good beating, Shi-Wu tried to salvage the situation with a remorseful attitude, saying, I will go to the Sagittarius Palace to apologize for what I've done. In return, Jian gave a sneer. At this point, you still haven't figured out the issue, have you? With a loud thud, another column of light descended right in front of Jian. Condemnation of the sky loomed between the two as Jian darkly stated, It seems you've forgotten an important thing upon seeing me here. The price. He uttered those two simple words, but it was like the Grim Reaper whispering in Shi-Wu's ear. Repeatedly, words echoed in his mind, death, 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 death. Feeling considerably small, he was certain he couldn't survive under his blade. Condemnation of the sky. As he stepped back in horror, Shi-Wu tried to think of a way to save himself. Suddenly, his eyes widened when he realized what he had just stepped on was the chain of Libra beads belonging to his brother. Ta-Won was now struggling to get up, injured from the violent appearance of Li Jian. Noticing his hands were empty and about to call his younger brother to find the bead chain, Ta-Won was horrified to realize it was in Shi-Wu's hands. He had activated it, changing something unknown, and smiled at his brother, saying, You're absolutely right, I'm such a useless kid. Luckily for me, you're very useful. The equivalent exchange skill of Libra caused the ring to glow, transforming the character, Yun Ta-Won. His entire body was enveloped in a beam of light, and then grotesque parts of the beast emerged, signifying that the transformation was complete. Ta-Won painfully struggled against the dark magic, but to no avail. Soon enough, he had transformed into the ugly, repulsive creature on the scales of Libra. Jian was no stranger to such heartless tricks. He looked up at the sky and laughed. I didn't expect my little brother to turn his own brother into a filthy creature and a divine being. This is truly outrageous, isn't it? This sacred art is really something. I've never seen anyone use this trick before. His foot lit up with the power of the Ophiuchus constellation. Then he stomped it down hard on the ground, creating a fortress. Shi-Wu finally understood what disappointment looked like. Staring intently at the scene before him, he mumbled, No way! A part of the creature that used to be Ta-Won's brother fell heavily to the ground. The entire Libra bow and the Zodiac skill that had just been activated were utterly crushed by the fortress of Ophiuchus. Jian smiled and explained to the inexperienced young one, the larger his fortress grows, the stronger the barrier becomes. Inside it, no one can use the powers of other constellations, so the strength of Libra is completely severed. Thus, the process of summoning the exchanged entity came to an abrupt end. It was truly a masterpiece so ugly that even demons would scorn it, leaving the brother, who had been of little use, turned into a pile of ash like a joke before Li Jian. He covered his face and laughed as if you were about to go crazy, then asked, What's wrong? Don't you find it funny? Now it's my turn to attack. Searching the Bible for the constellation of Ophiuchus, Li Jian picked out the second event. The Saint Sagittarius admired the master of the constellation of Ophiuchus, thus unlocking the ability to use the power of Sagittarius. Jian's eyes were suddenly embraced by the fire of the sun god. By the way, he also used the insightful eye skill of Sagittarius, stepping forward as he asked, "Do you have any last words? Speak up." Usually, before dying, people tend to atone. "I'll give you 3 seconds. If you want to confess, hurry and say it." His eyes blazed with the condemnation of the sky on his shoulder. His words were calm but carried a heavy threat. "If you want to leave a last will, choose your words carefully and say them, you bastard." Shiwu gritted his teeth, his body trembling as if having a seizure. He was so scared of him that he froze. Even the curses escaping his mouth sounded broken. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, Shiwu grabbed his head and screamed, "Damn it!" He roared in questioning. "Who the hell are you? Who are you that keeps bullying me? Is it because of what I called in the blood mist 10 years ago? But back then, I was too young and made a mistake. Haven't you ever done anything wrong when you were young? Or is it because I controlled the blood mist in Europe or attacked the Scorpion Palace Hospital? Those things were all forced upon me by those above. Anyway, you already handled the blood mist, right? Those who were thought to be dead 10 years ago were all saved. So why make a big deal about it now? Haven't everything been resolved?" Shiwu kept shouting louder. "What do you want from me after everything has ended? Do you know who I am?" His eyes blazing with intensity, he declared, "I am Yun Shiwu, son of Giselle Lawrence, the saint of the Libra Palace." Driven into a corner with no way out, he resorted to mentioning his mother to intimidate. Shiwu boldly asked, "If you touch me, will my mother let it go?" After shouting, he had to pause for a few seconds, unable to believe his eyes, noticing that Jian was dozing off to the point of drooling. Jian startled and asked, "Ha, are you done talking?" At that moment, he opened his eyes and asked, "Is there anything else? Speak." Yawning a few times for the kid to have a few more seconds. Is life really full of regrets that you have to talk so much? Seeing Shiwu trembling and pointing at himself in disbelief. Did this guy not hear anything I just said? But in reality, Jian heard everything, even though he had just dozed off. It was not just him who needed to listen. The skill of Sagittarius had captured the entire vivid image of Shiwu, displaying it for the whole world to see. It was at this moment that Shiwu panicked as he realized he had just revealed the truth to all of humanity about who was behind those horrific disasters. From people on the street to those in the mountains without mobile signals and even out at sea, everyone was able to see the sharp 4K livestream image. Roughly counting, it seemed that around 8 billion people were watching, truly a broadcasting god, the livestream king that many streamers envy but cannot attain. The penetrating gaze of Sagittarius, also known as the Eye of the All-Seer, belongs to the constellation Sagittarius. It had once helped Hugo Otter see through the floorboards to find Yang Wei being beaten to a pulp below. The words of the fool Shiwu had been transmitted by this skill throughout the world. Of course, it also reached the territory of Libra. They were in a frenzy, wanting to locate where Shiwu and Jian would put an end to this embarrassing act. But there was no news. The Libra headquarters was in chaos. They must find out where the two were to salvage the image of the constellation. Suddenly, someone pointed towards the lobby. Angry citizens were pouring in, demanding an explanation from Libra. The larger the number of followers, the greater the outrage after hearing this news. They want to know if it is true that the Libra boy is the one who caused the blood fog. Is it true that Libra caused those bloody events? Each person has their own question, and the crowd is becoming increasingly filled with hatred. If Li Jian had not appeared in time at the scene where 1,000 people have died like that, those goddamn Libras must face similar punishment. Yu Shiwu must be eliminated. These words of outrage received widespread agreement from the public. On the upper floor, sitting on the roof of a tall building, was a figure in a coat, chuckling at the sight of the public's outrage. Callie's lips curled into a delighted smile. In this situation, there's surely no way but to comply with what they want. What a pity, Shiwu. Apart from getting beaten up by his brother, that was it. Shiwu, on the other hand, also felt the overwhelming rage of the crowd that was aggressively demanding his execution at the Libra headquarters. Their hatred was terrifying, causing Shiwu to be unable to bear it, clutching his head in fear and moaning as if he were having a seizure. Jian was not moved by this scene at all. On the contrary, he found it quite enjoyable. Congratulations, Shiwu. You have rolled into the box of becoming the one whom the whole world has turned against and wants to kill. The condemnation of the Skyblade glowed, making Shiwu terrified. In the air, only the sound of a body dragging on the ground and Jian's calm voice remained. Do you know why I told you to make your last words? Because you should have apologized instead of making excuses. He pressed a sword against the boy's neck. The fun and games are over. Jian spoke in a deep voice. I'm giving you one last chance to plead for everyone in this world, and yet you choose to throw it away. Now, neither I nor they will give you any more chances. The image of Jian holding the condemnation of the sky to Shiwu's neck was, of course, broadcast live, causing the Libra forces to clutch their heads in horror. This greatly reduced the trust of the people in the Libra constellation. while the faith of their followers continued to decline. The more people despised the Libra, the more the constellation's position weakened, instead gaining goodwill towards the Ophiuchus sign. These events were made public to all disciples. Therefore, the entire Libra army was worried, shouting toward that direction, "Tell the Saint Master to let us attack quickly." In response to the noise, there was only a silence from Giselle. Of course, she wouldn't just watch her son die, and in her position as the zodiac star, the pinnacle of the world, she would not let anyone take her place. On the other side, as Jian raised his sword to finish Shiwu, the familiar golden light column burst out right behind him. It was the divine beast carrying news from Giselle directly to him, saying, "Stop now. Don't think I'll just sit idly by." Shiwu saw his mother appear like a savior and let out a happy shout, but she paid no attention to the useless boy, her cold tone making it unclear whether she was complimenting or scolding. Giselle simply hadn't expected him to be so determined to do something so crazy. This girl had just shown up and was already talking in an unbearable way. He opened his mouth to ask, "Do you need to say that unleashing disaster and destroying the city is a small matter?" Of course, Giselle avoided mentioning that and said she would take her son away immediately. "I know you're trying to provoke me, but don't you think this is a bit cowardly?" She huffed, clearly showing her attitude about the cowardly act. Why not mention the innocent boy? Then she stomped on Shiwu once more, thrusting the condemnation of the sky right in front of him. Kian said, "If you're unhappy with my way of educating, then go ahead and do it." Leaning his hand on the hilt of his sword, Jian gave her two options. One is to clarify all the brutal acts that the Libra has done and paid for them. Two is to bet everything fighting me, and of course, reveal who the one was that stabbed me in the tower. Both options made Giselle clutch her forehead in anger, muttering curses at Li Jian, but she didn't put herself in a position to choose between the two and aggressively shot back, "Why should I obey you?" And that was it. That sentence was no different from a refusal to save her son. Shiwu cried out for his mother, while Jian laughed heartily with delight. With just a flick of his hand, he cut through the blonde hair. A beast let out a scream from Giselle. The girl's voice trembled, unable to believe that Jian was doing this right in front of her, repeating the threatening words, "Do you think I will let this go?" This only excited Jian more, making him even angrier, while he could do much more fascinating things. Extending his hand, the green power of the Ophiuchus constellation shone as Jian waved his hand back toward Shiwu's body. This made Giselle realize what he intended to do, and she turned her eyes back. He flashed a cruel smile. And right before the horrified, disbelieving gaze of Libra, he brought the beheaded boy back to life. Shiwu clutched his face, shaking violently as he felt his neck still in pain, questioning, Why? I clearly died." Jian struck again at the boy, who was crying until his tears ran dry. The slice was so sharp that just a second later it burst open, spraying blood everywhere. Such a fatal blow would certainly kill him, so Jian applied the resurrection skill to Shiwu once more. The influence of the resurrection skill within the confines of Ophiuchus was both fast and precise, healing the wounds and bringing Shiwu back to life. He screamed in terror. What just happened? Li Jian's blade once again sliced for the noisy, screaming head. 3 times in a row, a boy was killed right before his eyes, driving Giselle mad as she shouted, "What do you want to do?" Reaching for the corpse, Jian continued to revive it. While grinning, he asked Giselle if she didn't see. Killing once was hardly enough fun, right? The little brat was panting behind, which made Jian very pleased. Killing once was never enough to make up for the others who had suffered, while her son was not the only one doing wicked things. Swinging his sword again, Jian decided to cut Shiwu as many times as the pain that Guy had caused, or he could end his own life as well. He was here to keep count. Shiwu felt like he had fallen into hell. Jian's shadow loomed long over him as he once again raised the condemnation of the sky, making him feel endless torment. Before the pain could even end, Jian continued to revive him, all happening before the people who held their breath in silence. Not a word was spoken. Jian's smile and his swings became faster and faster. He cut Shiwu in every possible way, all of which were fatal. Each time he died, Jian would call him back to continue receiving the slashes. Inside the Scorpion Hospital, Hudo Otters and his group witnessed the events firsthand, but no one seemed to feel pity upon hearing Shiwu's desperate pleas. There were moments when he was struck 3 times at once. Death was indeed painful, leaving a haunting impact on the Libra forces. There was nothing they could do. Watch with their eyes wide open as the screams of someone who had to endure death repeatedly were truly terrifying. Shiwu had to experience pain more than 20 times, yet Jian showed no intention of stopping. Giselle could no longer contain herself and shouted, "Is this guy really testing my endurance?" In response to the pointless question, the teleportation skill of Queen Larry and the absolute coordinate skill of the Sagittarius were unleashed simultaneously. A massive barrier appeared at the ceiling of the Libra Palace, dropping something enormous onto the ground with a thunderous explosion that shook the earth. Blood from that object splattered onto Giselle's face, feeling cold, and as she walked closer, she realized this seemed to be the remains of a large calamity. But Giselle's gaze collided with a severed head rolling in the corner, unmistakable with its striking blonde hair and the horrified expression of her eldest son. Upon realizing what had happened, she immediately trembled uncontrollably, biting her lower lip in deep hatred. The expression that caught John's eye only delighted him further. He asked, "Why are you just standing there like a statue?" His brutal lips opened wide and he roared madly, "Your beloved eldest son is back. Now say words of love and hug him tight." Her left eye turned a dark color, blue veins standing out on her face with every surge of anger. Clenching her fist, Giselle simply said, "You will pay for provoking me." But no one has ever threatened him and gotten away with it. Jian stealthily took the divine bird of Libra, pressing his face close to it with a cruel smile. "What have I provoked you with? Hey, you wretch, I'm just responding to your choice. Anyone who stands in my way will meet the same fate." He temporarily set aside the sun to let the scars that had healed whisper to Libra. No matter whether the one chosen by the ultimate deity or from a mysterious civilization, he doesn't care. Even if it's a deity, he will never be afraid. He wanted Giselle to hear this, though when she was showing her fury, Jian threw the divine bird high into the air and killed it instantly. He wore the smile of a victor, advising her to prepare her neck, waiting for him to come and cleave it. Dear Giselle Lawrence. With that, Jian struck down, turning the divine bird to ashes, completely severing the connection with Libra and erasing his intercontinental live stream. The remaining members of the Libra force hesitated to call upon the Holy Master, sensing a terrible surge of power from the woman Giselle. Li Jian's roar echoed far and wide, accompanied by a peak of anger that made the entire city tremble, as if it were experiencing an earthquake. Upon arriving, Giselle paid no attention to the people anymore. She shouted, "Dare you insult me? I will surely chop you up along with that trash." With each of her screams, the city shook violently, teetering on the brink of collapse. Giselle, filled with hatred, called his name for a long, long time before stopping. After a moment, Shiwu suddenly opened his eyes wide with fear, as if he had just escaped from a nightmare. But the nightmare deity had come to drive the condemnation of the sky into the ground, allowing this kid to wake up from his pain to continue what he had just done earlier. Suddenly, I forgot how many I was counting before, so let's start counting again from the beginning, shall we? His poor math skills muttered as he counted the total number of injured, about 5,000 plus the number of people in the Scorpion Hospital. Then he added the time the Otifsu family, his friend, suffered and converted it into installments. How much would that be? Shiwu knelt on the ground, begging for another chance to explain, but he did not listen and resolutely lifted the sky sword, preparing to strike down another 10,000 times to collect both principal and interest. No amount of tears from Shiwu was enough. Hell officially began now as the word one came from John's mouth. A few days later, in the Lion's Temple arena, someone had just fallen heavily to the floor. Meanwhile, the referee raised his hand to announce the victory of the vice commander, Yoha. The cheers of the spectators did not bring a smile to her face. Yoha's gloomy expression did not escape the eyes of the disciples. They wondered why she seemed so strange. Everyone noticed that. Contrary to her usual cold demeanor, the vice commander appeared quite bewildered. Mainly since that day when Li Jian's performance was broadcasted to the world, everyone had been amazed, and so was Yoha. But for some reason, she now wore an expression of daze, as if she had just suffered a heartbreak. Perhaps the image of Shiwu living in a cycle of death and resurrection was too sensitive, but that scene brought many people satisfaction. The Libras, who always felt superior and went around doing foul things, received their due retribution. In the arena, the overly excited host, oblivious to Yoa's expression, kept the microphone close to her, asking for her thoughts on this unprecedented streak of victories. "I have made a decision." Suddenly, Yoa let out that phrase, yet still maintained her dazed expression. She said, "I have decided to leave the Lion's Holy Order." Before the crowd could stir, she continued, "And then I joined the Sacred Order of Lord Jun." Her cold expression was broadcast everywhere, even on the television in the hospital room where Stephen was recovering. Some followers wanted to change the channel right away, fearing the leader might have a breakdown if he saw it again, but it was unnecessary since Stephen was already heartbroken and had fainted. As Oliver entered the hospital room, he heard the commotion of the followers trying to wake Stephen and felt disheartened. Both the leader and the deputy commander were nothing but disgrace to the Sacred Order. The loyal subordinates were still trying to shake Stephen awake, but given the public humiliation from both the Li Jian duo, he did not want to wake up at all. The television continued to switch to other news, covering a high-level meeting of the human side. As soon as it started, someone stood up to criticize. Libra always deceives the world. She has concealed the truth with a fog of blood and the mistakes of Sagittarius. Another council member immediately rebutted. There is no convincing evidence and Libra's position has not been verified, so we cannot draw conclusions. Not to mention, it is clear that Li Jun has set a trap for Libra and widely broadcasted it, with that arrogant deity asserting, "This is a common trick of the constellations." Provoking the young counselor's anger, 2 sons of Libra have died, and you can say that? It's such a serious matter, and Libra remains silent without rebuttal. Isn't that strange? The other side responded to the anger with a mocking attitude. Maybe Libra is trying to come up with some slow excuse. After watching the news for a while, Haley had to compliment Kevin. That was a pretty impressive manipulation of the media. Besides poisoning food, you can do this too, right, Virgo? Virgo smiled proudly. Those things were simple. Not everyone who lives in the Canadian wilderness would understand. And she added, I didn't put poison in John's food. It was his drink. Scorpio, it's an antidote to the stuff you put in Lee John's food. Haley immediately retorted, your antidote may work for what Kevin put in, but it's too much trouble. It's because of you that I wasted time. The two argued back and forth for a long time. To Sagittarius, they were no different from 2 kids. Did they think no one knew the other cared about John, which is why they acted like this? Suddenly, Kevin turned to Hugo Otters and asked, where is the founder of the constellation? He hasn't returned yet. Is he still busy? Indeed, he is really busy. The base in Hawaii that Libra used to have is now marked with a large construction sign for vehicles to come and clear everything out. Nearby, along with a heap of fast food and chill music, Li Jian, in a sleeveless shirt, is enthusiastically munching away. At his feet lies a mess of takeout boxes, and he's chewing while checking whether he has finished wrecking Libra's stuff to see what he can build for himself. On the positive side, he found the core of the calamity, which are crystal stones created from the crystallization of the calamity Li Jian had destroyed in the Tower of Evil before. Come to think of it, it seems they were planning to call him out with those stones he had created. That's why that dumb bird claimed to have successfully summoned him when he was tracking it. Tossing aside the hamburger and standing up, the construction worker Jung realized his lunch break was over and he had to dive back into work. Looking up at his creation, he felt refreshed, thinking he was about to have a new house. And there was also a gift for that woman. He wondered if it had arrived yet. The gift John was referring to was the head of the second son slumped in the middle of an intricately decorated wreath, inserted into the decorative pillar in Legra's temple. Giselle was so enraged upon seeing it that she increased the gravity, making everyone in the lobby kneel behind her. In a fit of rage, she knew that that guy John had sent this to humiliate her. Plus, Kevin Azar had publicly insulted Libra on television as well. She glanced at the person standing behind her and coldly asked, do we have no plans to deal with this many subordinates? Looking at the ground several meters away from her feet, which was cracking with each of the saints' anger, the apostle could only feel helpless. The Virgo was acting too quickly and broadcasting live, so no one could intervene in time. Thinking about the mockery of a servant of the Virgo goddess daring to infuriate her to this extent, Giselle felt her insides churn. We can't let those who cling to Jian live. Quickly gather our forces. The moment she muted her voice, gravity seemed to disappear. Still, with her head bowed, Giselle had made up her mind. Having been treated like this, we can't just sit still. We must launch an all-out attack. She waved her hand behind her, commanding her subordinates. Giselle needed to contact the Sacred Corps, allies, and all branches worldwide to gather forces and find every way to defeat Li Jian. Finally receiving the command, the group hurriedly ran out of the lobby to prepare for a concentrated attack, also seeking revenge for their young masters. Left with a completely silent red carpet, Giselle called for someone to appear. Pieces of the decorative tree in the lobby flew up and joined together right behind her. The Allegiant Owl stood firm, reporting that it had summoned the army of the mysterious civilization. All waited for orders, and finally something went smoothly. Giselle praised, good job! Her hand had already extended to unleash a surge of power and lifted it upwards. The globe was summoned, with dense black dots displaying the areas occupied by calamities gradually expanding to the size of a human. It loomed within Giselle's reach as she exerted her power. With just a flick of her finger, all the red-black specks on the surface were lifted and gathered in one corner of the Pacific Ocean. The black-gray territory of the mysterious civilization was stirred up as she used her power on the globe, creating waves and relentless thunder. The calamities present seemed to receive a signal and raise their heads. Following orders, they spread their wings wide and soared into the air, emitting loud noises. All the entities in the area took off into the sky in various shapes and sizes, numbering in the thousands. Among them was one that exuded a different kind of power from the rest, riding on the back of a summoned skeletal horse. It waited silently until the 2 words rang out, they're here. Before their eyes appeared flocks of calamities flapping their wings to gather. Lightning flashed across the sky, blindingly bright, as the riders soared above alongside the winged creatures, counting the numbers of the walking calamities, who soon formed into a formidable army, waiting in silence for orders. Giselle poked her finger into the ocean on the globe, conjuring the image of her hand having truly groped that place, stirring the waves. The black and red masses representing the plague rushed in violently like vines grasped by her hand. Before long, they gathered into a heap of red bricks in Giselle's hand. She watched it whirl in her palm, opening a blood-red eye filled with determination to defeat the Jian group. That eye resembled the one on her face as she yelled, "I will make you completely despair." The black territory flared up with a bloodthirsty eye. There were only 65 hours left before humanity faced a full-scale attack. On the island of Hawaii, once the headquarters of the Libra constellation, flames were now raging from the workshop and sacred site of the Ophiuchus constellation. The island's appearance was completely different. At the entrance stood a massive gate shaped like a winding silver serpent. Not far away, the sudden movement of the Sagittarius constellation flashed a beam of purple light, with the sound of shoes tapping out loud. Not only did Hugo step out, but he was also followed by 4 others, including the priestess of the Scorpio constellation, the legendary swordman Kevin, along with his wife and Keen's son. Upon arrival, Kevin complained, "What the hell is Li Jun doing here? Why did he suddenly bring us to Hawaii so early in the morning?" Hugo had no answer. He only knew that Li Jun was up to something here. Since stepping in here, Haley completely ignored everything around her. Just thinking about meeting Li Jun made her face flush. Hugo first noticed the giant white snake-shaped gate above. "What is this? When was it built?" he yelled. Next to the gate, a blonde girl in a nun's outfit stepped out to greet everyone. "You must be the guest that Mr. Li Jun mentioned, right?" She introduced herself as Iaso, former household god of both Aquarius and Libra, and I'm currently being called disinfected. She laughed as if it were a funny matter, but in reality, Iaso was a prisoner of the Ophiuchus domain, having been kidnapped by Li Jun from Libra, so she quickly joined the list of captives. In such a crude manner, it sounded to Haley like Li Jun personally brought her into his realm. The crowd noticed she was holding a green egg and asked about it. "That is the household god's egg of Ophiuchus, one of the rewards for passing the tests of strength, intelligence, and reputation." Aso simply said, "This is what Mr. Li Jun entrusted to me. He said that since I am the god of health and nursing, I could take care of it." Hearing it, one can immediately tell the responsibility of someone who has to take care of things that Li Jun does not want to touch. Yet that Kevin, oblivious to this, sighed and complained right next to Haley. Is that jerk Li Jun planning to get married or something? Without saying a word, Haley darkened her face and called for her servant behind her. Her body began to tremble, trying to speak clearly. "You bring everything you can from our divine team to Li Jun." Her servant didn't understand anything, about to ask for clarification when suddenly Haley turned around and yelled with a flushed face and sweat pouring down as if she had a fever. "Even if we have to carry a whole pillar here, hurry up. If we don't have anything to fight back with, we will lose." After finishing the task, the group was invited by Iso to pass through this door into the official territory of the Ophiuchus Palace. As soon as a small portion was revealed, a heat from inside poured out along with blinding light. When the door opened wide enough for the group to enter, a gust of air blew their hair and clothes wildly. When they saw the source of this power, they heard the extremely ferocious roar of the fire lizard that Li Jun called Flame Roar, releasing incredibly high-intensity flame. He was blowing his flame onto something and had to keep repeating this continuously to maintain the flame high. At this moment, the group realized that this place was designed like a furnace. Under the altar, the fire that was crackling due to the lizard was connected by dozens of chains leading to the center, which was hovering above a basin filled with fire. Hugo had never seen this scene before and asked in astonishment, "Is my friend planning to build a steel factory or what? But it looks just like a bathtub right in front." Kevin murmured to himself, "Couldn't that be lava taken from those damn lizards?" Each member of the group had a different expression. While Hugo's wife complained, "It's so hot here," he widened his eyes, not expecting his friend to create this after destroying the headquarters of Libra. Unrelated to the temperature and architecture here, Haley secretly praised, "Li Jun really has leadership skills. He truly is extraordinary, so cool." Just then, they heard a loud clanging sound from the side of the furnace and turned to see some chains moving extremely fast. A deep, cheerful voice greeted them roughly, "Wow, wow, isn't that the damn centaur slave of the Lord?" Jarl laughed heartily while turning the pulley. "He's been waiting for you." Next to him was Jotun with a fiery red appearance, almost blending in with the flames behind him. He tilted his head and asked the group, "Doesn't our workshop look magnificent? 3 slaves working in a crazy hot place like this and still laughing loudly. That shows they really like working here." The group entered and immediately turned right, trying to find a way to avoid talking to these 3 guides. The door on the right side didn't lead to the furnace anymore, but to a workshop with a door standing 3 meters tall. Looking at the style, Hugo recognized right away. If there's no forge here, it can't be called Li Jian's workshop. Since entering, Haley had heard the sound of a hammer striking. The further in they went, the clearer the deafening bang-bang became. It was a hammer artifact hitting a blade, flattening it. Stepping out from behind the strong figure hammering away, Hugo waved at his friend. Hey, we're here. Li Jian, shirtless, sweat pouring from his hair down his back as if he were taking a shower. Upon hearing Hugo's voice, he turned around with a relaxed smile and swept his soaked hair back. Oh, you've arrived. One hand holding the hammer artifact, the other muscular hand pushing his hair back. Just that simple act was enough to make Haley, having only glanced, burst out in a nosebleed, knowing this kind of scene was inevitable. Hugo looked over at his wife, who was clutching her flushed cheeks as if she wanted to scream, her expression rivaling Haley's, only missing a stream of blood from her nose. It was no surprise that she had been a fan of Li Jian for 20 years. Before Ji Woo even had the chance to scream, Haley was already hyperventilating and collapsed to the side, fainting. At this moment, I also suddenly had to take care of the little Scorpio, who had fallen to the ground like this. Kevin had left a long time ago. He couldn't stand such hot environments. A crisp sound of a can opening echoed in the air as Jim popped the top off a soda can and tilted his head back to drink, as if he had been thirsting for years. His friend was still picking out a spot to admire. Didn't you just break into someone's home yesterday? How did you manage to build this place so quickly? With a refreshing chuckle, he turned back to his friend and smiled. I have a new ability, quite useful actually. What Jian was referring to was the S-rank gluttony skill he had just received. When targeting an object, Jian could eat any type and recreate that object. This skill would be used if his divine power was greater than or equal to 70%. If the target was a being with greater power than the user, the skill could fail. If the skill fails, Jian could suffer side effects. But looking at his appearance, it was clear that everything was going smoothly. He exhaled sharply and said briefly, basically, I'm just combining the sanctuary with a futurist in my workshop into one. Glancing at the hammer artifact, he chuckled. It had been a while since he could go back to his original profession, and naturally, he felt much more motivated. Of course, Hugo was happy for his friend. Clearly, John's original profession was an artisan. Looking over at John, who was gulping down water, Hugo was about to say something when he suddenly felt a dense aura emanating from his left. When he looked over, he realized that something was surging in the air behind Jian, recognizing that his friend had detected a lingering power in the atmosphere. Jian didn't bother to hide it. This place is my sanctuary and hideout. Moreover, the forge and workshop can create countless sacred artifacts. He looked very confident when mentioning this. As long as I have motivation, there's a mountain of things I can create. Ever since I declared war, that trash won't be able to sit still. With a pile of things behind him, Hugo just wanted to know what he was currently crafting. He held a soda can and wiggled his index finger. I'm making a weapon for Yoa as promised to that girl. I'll also make one for Sum Jia and Jiwoo too. The mother and child couldn't contain their joy. Ignoring Hugo standing there pouting, your husband and father are right here and you're showing so much admiration. Suddenly, Jian reached out his hand towards his friend, leaving Hugo totally confused. What is he asking for? He shamelessly demanded the royal artifact from Hugo, but before he could snatch it away, loud bangs echoed from outside. Turning his head quickly, they were astonished to see the massive palace trembling as if it were shaking. Even Ms. Haley, who had fainted earlier, had disappeared. So the group hurriedly opened the doors of their territory to see what was happening, wondering if they were under attack. What was going on? Unexpectedly, just a few steps out of the Ophiuchus Palace, they saw a pile of wooden crates stacked about 5 meters high. It turned out to be an urgent delivery service from the Scorpion team to headquarters. Standing in front of it was Ms. Haley, trembling. She didn't look at anyone and opened her mouth to announce as if her teeth and lips wanted to clash together. The Holy Land is basically just a home for the gods, so if we are here, it's like a housewarming, right? Just consider this a housewarming gift. She didn't look at everyone. She thought she had spoken quite naturally. Little did she know that in front of everyone, she appeared no different than someone talking irrationally. Before noticing the blank expressions of those around her, Haley immediately opened a wooden crate beside her to see if there was food, money, or some kind of holy artifact to give to Jian right away. Hugo glanced at his friend, dazed yet sincere. Good luck. Haley seems really serious about you. Soon you'll have a couple just like me. However, in the box that Haley opened, there was no food or treasure, but a stack of something stacked on top of each other. It turned out to be letters along with various large and small envelopes, all crammed inside. Haley muttered, "This isn't my box." But when she picked one up, she clearly saw written on the outside addressed to Li Jian with a wax seal on it, indicating that no one had opened it to read. He frowned in disgust. Who would send me a letter? In his ear, his friend's teasing voice broke in. What if it's a fan letter for you? Who knows, you might open it to find the words, I love you, Lee John right there. Pulling out a few envelopes, Haley skimmed through them, noticing that all of them had names written on them, and the wax seal was clearly from the lion, which left John thoroughly confused. But before figuring out the truth, she had to silence her friend to stop him from talking nonsense. Suddenly, some Jane chimed in, that's right. The Lion Club has been in big trouble ever since your sister announced she would leave that sanctuary. Who knows? Maybe that's why they're sending letters to you. At that moment, at the headquarters of the Leo Club in the US, where a towering 40-story building stood imposing on the main street, Stephen's large hand slammed down onto the table, full of anger. Why did you say that? He struck the table hard, still seething with rage. Surrounding him, voices mingled with questions. Even if you leave, things won't end easily. Do you know how many people will leave with you, Cheon Yova? Faced with Stephen's fury, Marker appeared small, standing sullenly with his hands behind him, and replied casually, yes, I know. Saying he understood but appearing indifferent made Stephen's face contort with frustration. Having exhausted his options for banging on things, he had to sincerely ask for the reason. What's the problem? I've given you everything you wanted. Just tell me. Yoha unexpectedly found him to be reasonable. After a moment, she still said something to infuriate Stephen. Please let me leave and transfer to another club. In desperation, he put his hands to his face and lamented. What about the contract clauses, salary, or anything else that matters? Just say yes, of course I'll adjust it. Yet Yoa said, no, I don't need those things. So what's the conclusion? He sighed. Do you really want to leave this place? Suddenly changing the subject, Stephen asked an unrelated question. How has she been lately? I mean her arm. Stephen's question brought back memories for both of them from 10 years ago, on a day when it was pouring rain, a few days after the blood fog disaster occurred. In the quiet hospital of Scorpio Palace, the sound of the breathing machine was the only thing breaking the midnight stillness. Sonja and Yoa's mother was lying on the hospital bed, and the two sisters were peacefully asleep together under the heavy rain. Suddenly, Yoa sensed a noise and a light coming from somewhere. The little girl Yoa sleepily stepped outside and pushed the door to see if her father had come home. But there was no one in the hallway. Instead, the elevator door was wide open, emitting a warm golden light, which made her rub her eyes and walk over to see what was going on. The elevator, about to close, was completely empty. Yoa was dozing off when she suddenly heard a voice right above her. Hello, you must be Yoa, right? The voice belonged to Giselle beneath her cloak just as thunder rumbled outside, completely shaking off Yoa's drowsiness. Turning around, Yoa saw the woman standing very close to her, Giselle, the saint of Libra, displaying a rather ominous smile as she pulled down her cloak. Oh dear, did I scare you? Her blonde hair and distinctly foreign-looking eyes were unforgettable after just one glance. Yoa had seen her interviewed on television before. The girl took a step back in shock. This person is the Libra saint. Giselle's attitude at that moment was quite normal. She asked Yoa, I would like to talk to you for a moment. Shall we go somewhere else?